Welcome to English Podcast.
I am Lisa.
And I'm Eric. Do you want to improve your English easily? If so, you're in the right place.
So let's get started and make English easy. So Eric, what are the words today?
The first word today is precious. Then we will continue with reputation and to involve. Then to weigh up. And the final one is in terms of something.
Okay, let's start with the first word.
The first word today is precious.
Precious.
Precious means very valuable or important, something that you love or care about very much.
When we say something is precious, we mean it's special and worth a lot to us.
Exactly. Let me give an example sentence. This ring is precious to me because it was my grandmother's.
It means that the ring is very important and valuable to the person because it belonged to their grandmother.
Good explanation. Now it's your turn, Lisa. Can you give us another example?
Sure. Here's another example. Time is precious, so don't waste it. It means that time is very valuable and important, so we should use it wisely and not waste it.
Perfect! So, as you can see, precious is used when talking about money or things that are valuable in meaning.
Yes, and precious is often used with things like jewelry, time, memories, or even people, when they are very special or important to us.
Now, let's have a look at a short dialogue to show how precious is used in a conversation.
Wow, that ring is beautiful. Is it new?
No, it's actually very old. It was my mother's and she gave it to me. It's really precious to me.
That's so special. You're lucky to have something so precious.
In this dialogue, Sophie says the ring is precious to her because it belonged to her mother. It's valuable because it's special to her, not because of money.
This shows that precious can describe things with a lot of emotional value.
Yes. So, Eric, would you say precious is a common word?
Yes, I'd say it's fairly common, especially when people talk about things that are important to them, like memories, people, or meaningful items. It's not a word you would use in casual conversations about everyday things. But when something has deep value, precious is a perfect word.
I agree. It's a bit more formal than words like special or valuable, but it adds a stronger sense of importance.
Absolutely. So, when you want to talk about something that is really important or special to you, you can say, it's precious.
Great advice. Well, that's all for the word precious. Let's move on to our next word.
The next word is reputation.
Reputation.
Reputation is a noun. It means the opinion that people have about someone or something. For example, if many people think you're honest and hardworking, you have a good reputation. But if people think you're untrustworthy, you have a bad reputation.
Yes, reputation is how people see you or what they think of you based on your actions, behavior, or even the things you've said.
Let's give some example sentences, Lisa. My sentence is, John has a good reputation because he is always helpful.
Great sentence. Could you explain it, Eric?
Sure. It means that people think John is a good person because he helps others. So, he has a good reputation.
It's my turn. The restaurant has a great reputation for its delicious food and excellent service. It means that people have good opinions about the restaurant. They believe it has high-quality food and service, so the restaurant has a good reputation.
Thanks for explaining, Lisa. Before we move on, let's talk about how we use reputation in sentences. Sometimes we say a reputation for something. For example, he has a reputation for being late. Here, for tells us why someone has a reputation.
Exactly. You can also say someone has a reputation as something. For example, she has a reputation as a great teacher. Here, as shows the role or quality that someone is known for.
Now, let's do a short dialogue using reputation.
Have you heard about the new cafe in town?
Yes, I've heard. It has a good reputation for its coffee.
Really? I thought. It had a bad reputation because some people said the service was slow.
Maybe it depends on the day, but I'm going to try it myself and see.
That was a good dialogue. The word reputation can be used in many situations, like talking about people, places, or even businesses. Now, let's have a little chat about the word. Do you think reputation is a formal or informal word?
I think reputation is a bit more formal. We often hear it in business or when talking about people more seriously, but you can still use it in casual conversations.
I agree. Reputation can help people make decisions about who to hire, where to eat, or even which products to buy.
Yes, and it's important because everyone has a reputation, even places like restaurants or stores. So it's a useful word to know. And remember, reputation can be good or bad.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we explained reputation pretty well, Eric. Let's move on to our next word.
Sure. The next word is involve.
Involve.
It's used a lot in English, and it has two meanings. The first meaning of involve is to include someone or something in an activity or situation. For example, if you are involved in a project, it means you are part of the project and doing something for it. The second meaning of involve is when something requires or needs certain actions. So, if something involves a lot of work, it means you need to do a lot of work to complete it.
Yes, it's very common in English. Let's start with the first meaning. Here's the first example sentence. The teacher involved the students in the discussion. It means that the teacher made the students join the discussion. The students are taking part in the conversation.
Now, for the second meaning, the job involves working late hours. This means that working late hours is part of the job. If you accept the job, you will have to work late as part of your responsibilities.
Let's talk a little more about how to use involve. It's a verb, and it's often followed by a noun or an activity. For example, involve people, or involve work in. When you're talking about activities, you often use the ing form of the verb, like involve working, involve studying, and so on.
Good point, Lisa. Now, let's do a short dialogue using the word involve with both meanings.
This new project sounds interesting. Will I be involved?
Yes. The boss has decided to involve you in the planning stage. It also involves working late hours, so be ready.
No problem. I'm happy to be involved with the project. We should also involve John in the project, I think.
Yes, why not? Let's talk about this later.
That was a great dialogue, Eric. Involve is such a flexible word with different uses, don't you think?
Yes, it really is. You can use it in so many situations.
Eric, do you think involve is common?
Definitely. Involve is very common, especially at work, school, or any activity that requires planning and teamwork. People often use it to talk about who should be included. Plus, the two meanings make it even more useful and common.
Well said, Eric. Okay, well, that's it for the word involve. We hope you have learned it well. Let's move on to our next word.
The next word is weigh up.
Weigh up.
Weigh up is a phrasal verb. It means to think carefully about the advantages and disadvantages of something before making a decision. For example, when you're trying to decide between two jobs, you weigh up the advantages and disadvantages of each job.
It's like comparing two or more things to see, which is better or more important. You weigh up the options to make a good choice.
Let's look at some example sentences. My sentence is, before buying a car, I need to weigh up the costs. It means that before I decide to buy a car, I will think about how much it will cost. I will look at the price, insurance, and other expenses to decide if buying the car is a good idea.
Now, let me give my example. We weighed up the advantages of moving to a new city before making a final decision. It means that before we decided to move to a new city, we thought about some advantages like new job opportunities and better living conditions, and then we made our choice.
Great explanation. Now, let's hear a short dialogue on how the word is used in a conversation.
So, have you decided whether to take the new job offer?
Not yet. I'm still weighing up the salary and the work hours.
I agree. It's important to weigh up all the details before making a big decision like this.
That was a great dialogue. Weigh up is such a useful phrase when you're making decisions. Don't you think, Eric?
Yes, I agree. It's really helpful when you're thinking about big choices in life, like moving, changing jobs, or even buying something expensive.
Eric, would you say weigh up is more formal or informal?
I think it's pretty neutral. You can use it in both formal and informal conversations. It's a phrase you could use with friends, but also in a work setting when you're discussing options or plans.
That's true. And it's a good phrase for anyone who wants to express that they're thinking carefully about their options.
Yes, it's always important to weigh up your choices before making a decision.
Well, that's all for today's word, weigh up. We've reached the last word of today. So, Eric, what is the last word today?
The last word today is in terms of something. This is a common phrase used to talk about a specific aspect or feature of something. It helps us focus on one part of a bigger topic. For example, if you're talking about a job, you might say, in terms of salary, meaning you're only talking about the money part of the job, not other things like the work hours.
So, if you're talking about something, but only want to focus on one part of it, you use in terms of.
Let's look at some example sentences to understand it better. The city is great in terms of public transport. It means that the public transport in the city is really good. So, when you say in terms of public transport, you're only talking about how good the buses and trains are, not other things like restaurants or parks.
That's a good example. Here's mine. The two cars are very similar, but in terms of price, one is much cheaper than the other. It means that when we compare the two cars based on their price, not anything else. We're only looking at prices.
Let's hear an example dialogue about the phrase.
I'm looking for a new laptop. What can you tell me about this one?
Well, in terms of performance, this is the best model.
How about the battery life?
In terms of battery life, it can last up to 10 hours on a single charge.
Sounds great. And in terms of price?
In terms of price, the other one is cheaper.
That was a good example, Lisa. It shows how in terms of helps to focus on specific aspects of the laptop.
Yes, Eric. Well, what would you say about in terms of?
It's very common. You'll hear it a lot in both formal and informal conversations when people want to focus on specific areas of a discussion. It's a good way to break down information and compare things.
I agree. It's a very useful phrase when you're trying to explain something clearly and focus on just one part of the topic. You might hear it at work, in school, or even in everyday conversations about choices or decisions.
Exactly. It's a phrase that works well in many situations, from business meetings to casual chats with friends.
Absolutely. So, next time you want to compare or explain something in a specific way, remember to use in terms of.
That's great advice. Well, I think we have finished the podcast today.
Yes, Eric. I hope our followers found today's episode helpful.
I hope so, Lisa. Okay, thanks for listening. Keep practicing your English.
And stay tuned. Bye for now. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Eric. We can't believe we've made it to 100 episodes. Thank you all for joining us on this incredible journey.
Yes, it's fantastic. 100 episodes. Thank you for all your support. So let's get started and make English learning easy. So Eric, what are the words today?
The first word today is tiny. Then we will continue with spot on and to persuade, then to figure out, and the final one is be up to one's ears in something.
Let's start with the first word, Eric.
Sure, the first word we're going to explain today is tiny.
Tiny.
Tiny is an adjective, and it means something is very, very small. It's smaller than small. If something is tiny, it's hard to see.
This is a great word to describe something that is much smaller than usual.
Let's look at the first example sentence. The baby held a tiny toy in her hand. It means that the toy is very small, so small that it fits in the baby's hand.
Here's another example. We saw a tiny bird sitting on the fence. This means that the bird is very small. It's smaller than most birds, so we call it tiny.
Yes, and it's important to know that tiny is informal. You wouldn't use it in formal writing, but it's perfect for everyday conversation when you want to talk about something small.
Now, let's move on to a short dialogue to show how tiny can be used in a conversation.
My kitten is so tiny. She fits in the palm of my hand.
That's adorable. I used to have a tiny puppy, but he's big now.
They grow up so fast, don't they?
In the dialogue, Nina says that her kitten is tiny, meaning it's very small and can fit in her hand. Ben says he had a tiny puppy, but it's bigger now.
Yes, and this shows how tiny is often used to talk about small animals or objects, especially when they're cute or very small compared to normal size.
So, Eric, do you think tiny is a common word in English?
Yes, it's quite common, especially in casual conversations. You'll often hear people use tiny when they're talking about small things in a friendly way. It's not too formal, so it's perfect for everyday speech.
It's a simple and useful word that's easy to understand. People use it when they want to emphasize how small something is, and it's a good word for English learners to know.
Exactly. So remember, when you want to describe something that is very small, you can use the word tiny.
Well, I think we've covered tiny pretty well. Shall we move on to our next word?
Yes, let's do that. The next word is spot on.
Spot on.
Spot on is an adjective, and it means exactly right or completely correct. When you say something is spot on, you're saying that it's perfect or matches the truth exactly.
Yes, it's a very positive phrase. If someone's answer or guess is spot on, it means they are 100% right. Let's look at the first example sentence. Your answer to the math problem was spot on. It means that the answer to the math problem was completely correct.
Here's another example. The weather report was spot on today. It rained just like they said it would.
This means that the weather report was exactly right. They predicted rain, and it rained. So the report was spot on.
Let's talk a bit more about how to use spot on. It's an informal phrase, so you'll hear it a lot in casual conversations when you want to say that something is correct or perfect. You can use it with people's answers, predictions, or even opinions.
Yes, but remember, you wouldn't use it in formal writing, like in a business report. It's more for speaking with friends or family every day. And it's easy to use. Just say something is spot on when it's exactly right.
Now, let's move on to a short dialogue to show how spot on can be used in a conversation.
Your prediction about the score was spot on. You said it would be 2-1, and that's exactly what happened. Yeah, I'm surprised I got it right. I guess I was spot on this time. You sure were.
In the dialogue, Sam says that Jake's prediction was spot on, meaning his guess about the score was exactly correct. The score ended up being 2-1, just like Jake said.
Yes, and Jake agrees that his guess was spot on. So, Eric, do you think spot on is a common phrase in English?
Yes, it's quite common, especially in casual conversations. You'll hear it often when people are talking about things like answers, predictions, or even when someone gives good advice. It's informal, so it's great for talking with friends, but not for formal situations.
I agree. It's a really useful phrase because it's easy to understand and use. Everyone likes to be spot on when they give answers or make predictions.
Exactly. So remember, when something or someone is exactly right, you can say they are spot on.
Okay, that's it for the word spot on. We hope our listeners found the phrase spot on helpful. Let's move on to our next word, Eric.
Sure. The next word is to persuade.
To persuade.
To persuade means to make someone believe or do something by giving them reasons.
When you persuade someone, you are trying to change their mind or get them to think the way you do. Can you give the first example, Eric?
Sure. I persuaded my friend to come to the party. It means that at first the friend didn't want to come to the party, but after talking to them, you made him agree. You changed his mind, and now they want to come to the party. Now it's your turn, Lisa.
Okay. She persuaded her brother to study harder for his exams. This means she made her brother believe that studying more would be a good idea. After talking to him, he decided to study harder.
Let's talk a little more about how to use persuade. It's usually followed by a person and to plus the action. For example, you persuade someone to do something, like persuade her to go, or persuade him to study. You can't say, persuade her going, or persuade him study. You need the to before the verb.
Important grammar point. Now, let's move on to a short dialogue to show how persuade can be used in a conversation.
I didn't want to go hiking, but my brother persuaded me to join him.
How did he persuade you?
He said the weather would be perfect, and we could have a picnic after. That changed my mind.
In the dialogue, Anna says her brother persuaded her to go hiking. This means she didn't want to go at first, but her brother convinced her by telling her about the good weather and the picnic.
And Tom asks how he persuaded her.
Yes, that's right. So, Eric, what would you say about persuade? Is it a common word in English?
Yes, it's quite common, especially in situations where people are trying to convince others. You'll hear it in conversations, especially when people are making decisions. It's not too formal or informal, so you can use it in many situations.
I agree. It's a helpful word to know because we often need to persuade people in our daily lives, whether it's about plans with friends or decisions.
Exactly. So remember, when you want to change someone's mind or get them to do something, you can use the word persuade.
Well, I think we have explained the word to persuade pretty well. Let's continue with the next word.
Sure, the next word is figure out.
Figure out. Figure out is a phrasal verb, and it means to understand something or solve a problem after thinking about it. When you figure something out, you work to find the answer or solution.
Exactly. It's a very useful phrase when you're talking about solving problems or understanding something that was difficult before. Let's look at the first example sentence. I couldn't figure out the math problem, so I asked the teacher for help.
It means that the person couldn't find the answer to the math problem by themselves, so they needed help from the teacher. They couldn't figure it out on their own.
Right. Here's another example. We need to figure out how to get to the airport on time. This means that they need to make a plan or find a solution to get to the airport on time. They need to think and solve the problem of time.
It's important to remember that figure out is informal. You'll hear it a lot in casual conversations when people are trying to solve problems or understand something.
Now, let's move on to a short dialogue to show how figure out can be used in a conversation.
We need to figure out where we're going to stay during our trip.
I know. I've been looking online, but I can't figure out which hotel is the best.
Let's check the reviews together. That might help.
In the dialogue, Sophie says, they need to figure out where to stay, meaning they need to make a plan or find the best place for their trip. They don't know yet, so they have to think about it.
And Leo says he can't figure out which hotel is the best, meaning he's not sure and can't decide by himself. They're both trying to solve the problem of finding a good hotel.
So, Eric, do you think figure out is a common phrase in English?
Oh, definitely. It's very common, especially in everyday conversations. You hear people saying figure out all the time when they are talking about understanding something new or solving a problem.
I agree. It's informal, but not too much. So you can also use it in casual conversations with friends, at work, or even in emails when you want to sound friendly but clear.
That's a good point. So remember to use figure out whenever you're talking about solving or understanding something. It's super useful in everyday English.
Well, that's all for this word. Let's move on to the last word of today, Eric.
Okay, Lisa. The last word of today is be up to one's ears in something.
Be up to one's ears in something.
It's an idiom that means to be very busy or have a lot of something to deal with.
It's like saying, you're so busy that the work reaches to your ears.
Exactly. Let me give an example sentence. I can't go out tonight. I'm up to my ears in homework.
It means that the person has so much homework that they're too busy to go out.
Good explanation. Now it's your turn, Lisa. Can you give us another example?
Sure. Here's another example. I'm up to my ears in debt after buying a new car and paying for school. It means that I have a lot of debt and it feels overwhelming. Just like I am trying to solve a lot of financial problems. I'm up to my ears in debt.
Great example. And grammatically, the phrase is often followed by in and then the thing that's overwhelming you, like in work, in laundry, or in debt. It's flexible, but the meaning stays the same.
Good point. Now, let's hear a short dialogue using the phrase, be up to your ears in something.
Hey, Sarah, want to grab coffee later?
I'd love to, but I'm up to my ears in work right now.
Oh no. Has your boss given you too many projects again?
Yeah, and I'm also up to my ears in emails. I haven't even had lunch yet.
Okay, I see. Maybe we can catch up this weekend?
That would be great.
That was a great dialogue. Did you notice how they used up to your ears?
Yes, I did. It really shows how we use this phrase to describe being very busy.
So, Eric, let's talk about the idioms.
Sure, it's informal and often used in casual conversation. It's not something you'd likely use in a formal letter, but it's great for talking to friends. You'll often hear it when someone has a lot of responsibilities or problems that they're trying to manage.
Agreed. And it's easy to remember because it paints a picture in your mind, being so busy that you're almost underwater with all your tasks.
Yes, like something you have to handle has reached your ears.
Exactly. Well, we finished our podcast today.
Yes, Lisa. I hope our followers found today's episode helpful.
I hope so, Eric. Okay, thanks for listening. Keep studying your English.
And stay tuned.
Bye for now.